Okay, so we have made our way to step 8, which consists of evaluating arguments, producing a paragraph, or as long as it's necessary, to take a stance on whether a particular argument is persuasive or not, and then to justify that stance. Now, what we're doing in step 8 is we're sort of kicking away the training wheels. We're no longer going to produce a diagram, although you can. That's one way of doing some pre-writing for evaluating arguments. It could be very, very effective. Of course, as you encounter arguments in your daily life, you're not always going to have the time to stop, sketch a quick diagram. Hopefully, all the practice you've had in diagramming that you've done prior to this step has left you with an ear. You're tuned to argumentative structure. You are habituated to thinking about the function that any claim makes in a certain argument. Now, and so you're going to use that acclimation to sort of notice things and then to make observations about the kinds of claims that are made and how they're used in an argument in order to produce an evaluation. Remember, at step 8, you have to make a judgment and back it up. But I always really encourage a bunch of pre-writing notes. So what I do when I'm doing step 8 is I'm reading the argument, making some notes about the kinds of claims that are made, the kinds of evidence that's used, and then I use my notes in formulating a final polished paragraph. So I'm going to read this argument and make some notes. So I'm just noticing that a lot of this is first-hand observation, so I'm going to take that into account. Yeah, also based on claims about the weather in London. But I'm also thinking about how those observations are being used right now. So do I think that the fact that the under the coat collar is damp, she's turned it up against the wind, there seems to be the author is relying on certain explanations of facts. So there could be other reasons that the coat collar is damp, for example. But generally, it seems that the author is choosing the most likely explanations for the phenomena. Most centrally, the author is using observations to derive a set of traits that the location in question must have, and then claiming that Cardiff is the only place with those traits. My notes are actually, these notes are, more clear and complete than sometimes the ones that I write. I'm going to use a lot of them when I actually write the evaluation. So let's write the evaluation. This is a persuasive argument as long as the observer who is speaking is reliable and the implicit claim that Cardiff is the only location that meets the criteria developed is true. It's a little awkward. I'm going to go pretty that up eventually, but let me develop these things. The argument relies heavily on observations that the speaker is making. For example, that the collar is damp, underside of the collar is damp. So as long as that speaker is reliable, there's no reason to reject those claims. Those observations are the basis for a list of characteristics that the place in question must have. And as long as the speaker is correct that Cardiff is the only place that has those characteristics, then the argument is persuasive. If, however, it turns out that there is another place that also meets those conditions, the argument would fail. Let's see. It's also true that the author claims certain kinds of explanations for the observations that she or he is making. And it's possible that other explanations could work. For example, maybe the person lives, let's say, for example, like why could the collar, there could be another reason that the collar is damp other than the fact that the person turned the collar up against the wind. Maybe the underside of the collar is damp because it was ironed. No, that's not a good explanation. Because it had been cleaned and hadn't had a chance to dry. However, that explanation seems less likely than the one the author suggests. Okay, so those are the main points I want to make. I'm not sure the order is quite right, so I'm just rereading it and thinking you can watch me edit it a little bit. Typo there. I'm just going to put a little segue. Neatening it up a little bit. Okay, I think that's about right. I just wanted to add a little bit to contextualize the explanation and how the author was using explanations. So I added that last sentence that's saying that the author's making other explanations, but they seem reasonable. So in my evaluation, I have made a judgment. Okay, that's very important. I've taken a stance. Lots of different ways to phrase that, but I've done that. And then the rest of the evaluation backs up my claims and explains them, defends them. Okay. Now, notice that I'm not using the words acceptability. I think I avoided the word premise, relevance. What I'm using the ideas of acceptability. So I'm talking about why I'm accepting the observations and under what conditions I might not do that. I'm also talking about the sub-arguments. So the author is using observations to derive explanations. Those are sub-arguments, and I'm saying that, oh, you could think that there might be other explanations, in which case those might not work, but in the end I'm persuaded that those explanations are relevant. Okay, so I've used, especially I think, acceptability and relevance without the terms themselves. Okay, I think that's a good one.